Please welcome Rick Werber.
Thank you, friend. Appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody. Well, there we go. How's the conference? Awesome. How's karaoke? That's what I really want to know. All it takes is one. Well, Javier, thank you for that introduction. Rob and Lenny, thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it. And I am just thrilled to be here presenting to you all. You know, I bumped into George DiVenuti in the elevator coming down, and it kind of reminded me. George and I opened up the Burlington Marriott Hotel in Boston, outside of Boston, in 1983. It was hotel number 796. Anybody know what the significance of the 96 is? The old timers do. It's the 96th hotel, period, in Marriott, and that's domestic, global, everywhere. So I think the room, since this is only really half the domestic or half the group here, would have been a whole lot smaller back then. So you guys have absolutely come a long, long way. So, you know, we've got some slides with some of our properties up here, and I don't know, has anybody been to the New York Marquis lately? Yeah. So, you know, Bill Mitchell is DOE, and that's a host-owned asset. And Bill's been telling many of you for a long time that mine is bigger than yours, right? Long, long time. What you didn't know is he's now talking to the television that adorns the exterior of his building. It's TV, billboard, 330 feet wide, 78 feet tall, and has got a diagonal measurement of 2,632 inches. He only paid about $50 million for it. So who here is in a host-owned asset? So how'd you feel when you saw my name on the agenda? Were you concerned about those incriminating pictures, the embarrassing ones that we take, Tim and I, as we're walking through properties? Well, take a breath, because my legal department wouldn't let me show them here today. What I do want to do, and all kidding aside, is recognize that all of you have a very demanding job. We know you're out there 24/7 by 365. The unsung heroes in many respects in your buildings. You do your job day in, day out. I spent 27 years on the operations side of the business in a variety of different functional areas and with a bunch of different companies. But I made the transition to ownership about 6 years ago. And it has been an interesting paradigm shift for me. So what I want to do today is to provide you with the knowledge so that you are more appreciated by your ownership, right? And I want you to begin to think like an owner thinks. That said, this disclaimer on the screen means it's really one ownership represented, in my opinion, on behalf of hosts. Your owners may be different depending on what their various strategies are. So just a little bit about Host before we start. We're the largest U.S. hospitality real estate investment trust in the country. You can see the statistics. We've got 139 hotels. We do business in 17 different countries. Total square footage of 63 million and just under $20 billion value. Only the best brands, as you can see, and only the best management companies. That's why we're here. You guys represent about 60% of the portfolios under management. We all have mission statements, right? One of the things that may be a little bit different from an ownership perspective is this concept of enhancing and maximizing the value of our portfolio. You don't need to know the rest of that stuff. That's my little engineering team, but that's our focus day in, day out. Enhance and maximize the value of the portfolio. So to understand value, you have to understand a little bit, and this may be a little bit hard to pick up on a screen, but to understand the basic real estate model, right? It's not different from buying a house or picking a stock. You want to buy low, You want to somehow add value, and in the case of your house, you may be renovating or adding on, right? In case of a stock, generating cash flow through dividends, and you want to sell high. It's pretty much that simple. Buy low, sell high, do some stuff in between. So this is where we're going to see if people are awake, I think. So when we talk about value, you know, when you've all dealt with your asset managers as they come and visit and do their owners' meetings, but the question is, what does that really mean and how is that different? And to understand, you might have heard the term cap rate. Now, I don't want to go into a whole finance 101 sort of thing, but I do want to explain to you what they're talking about, because it took me a long time to figure this out. Now, if you remember nothing from this, remember this formula. Cap rate is equal to NOI. What's NOI? Net operating income, right? Basically your revenue, less your operating expenses, less your more fixed type expenses, divided by asset value being what the value of the property is. Okay? Another way to express it mathematically is just the asset value is equal to NOI divided by the cap rate. If you have any one of these three, you can solve, you can solve for the third, obviously. So let's go through a quick example. So you buy a property for $100 million. It spends off $10 million of NOI. Okay, what was the cap rate? Pretty simple math. So cap rate's the NOI divided by asset value. You got $10 million in NOI divided by $100 million that you paid for it. So it's 10% or 0.1, right? So the bottom line is you bought the property at what's called a 10 cap. Okay? And again, that's important to understand. So when you own an asset and you're looking to enhance the value of the asset, there's basically two ways to do it. You can increase profitable revenue with an emphasis on profitable, because if you increase revenue, but you also disproportionately increase expenses, you haven't added to the value. Or you can decrease your operating expenses. I would imagine that many of you are in that second bucket. That's the thing, that's where you have your most influence and control, in the ability to reduce operating expenses. So you can calculate the value, okay, the value that you're bringing to the table if you know your cap rate. Quick example, and this may be a little bit difficult for those of you to see them back, and for that I apologize. But let's say you've got an energy ROI you want to implement, and it's going to save, and you can apply this to anything, but $150,000. You're going to take $150,000 on your P&L. So if you look at this, the hotel, don't be, this is all in millions or thousands, I guess. So 25 million in revenue, 25 million in revenue. Beforehand, utilities are running you $1,550,000. After you do your chiller replacement, your building automation system, your in-room energy management system, your VFDs, whatever they happen to be, you see everybody, we dropped the utilities from 1.5 to 1.4. Everybody with me so far? All right. So if you follow the math, and I'm just going to highlight it for you, the before scenario where your utilities were running 1.55 million, you've got all these expenses that come down here. At a 10 cap, you do the math, what it's showing is the value of the hotel is $50 million. So under that scenario, you go to sell the asset, you're going to expect to get about $50 million for it. But if you guys can control and take that $150K out of the P&L at that same cap rate, you just increased the value of the asset by $1.2 million by saving $150,000 annually. That's powerful stuff, and this is what gets your asset managers really excited. You're going to have to trust me on that. So, but if you keep going and say, okay, well, some markets, inner city, hotter type markets, may be a lower cap, and if you do the math, same $25 million hotel, right, same thing, but at a 6 cap, when you do the math, that asset's worth $83.3 million when you go to sell it, right? And over here, after saving that 150,000, now it's worth over 85 million. So actually at a 6 cap, your value enhancement translates to $2 million. So you've taken $150,000 out, you may be in an inner city hotel, or you may be in a great resort location, and now all of a sudden, you've added $2 million when the hotel is eventually sold. So part of the question from you might be, hey, that's great for you guys, but what's in it for me? What's in it for me as the operator? What's in it for me as Marriott? Well, you know, you've all got different types of management agreements and nothing applies, but assuming that you're entitled to some sort of profit sharing through incentive management fees, right? That $150,000 reduction at a 20% IMF, again, incentive management fee, translates to, oh, I messed that one up. Translates right here to an additional, where do we go? $30,000. See the IMF, we went from 1.25 to 1.28. So there is potential reward for doing ROIs beyond that of just ownership. All right, so what are our general expectations? Again, host's perspective. You guys are managing our business, but you're also managing our physical plants, right? You're managing our structures, you're managing our buildings. You guys have some of the most phenomenal structures, policies, protocols, support in the world, probably the finest. You've got Transcendent, great tool, right? So we're expecting full implementation of those types of systems. We're also looking for you to be making informed, data-driven systems. When you call me up and say, hey, Rick, we need a new chiller, right? And I say, why? And you say, well, because ours is old. Well, that's probably not a good reason, right? So have the data, know what the repair history is. Be able to tell me what the current eddy current analysis shows, the oil, vibration analysis, and let's really try to figure out whether it's the right decision or not. So use those systems, use those tools. Root cause identification, okay? There's a lot of DOEs out there that are focused on addressing symptoms rather than root cause. And there are times when you have no choice, that you got to put that patch in, that you got to build that internal gutter system, you know, that you got to put the tarp with the hose to the bucket. You know, we found a lot of that stuff over time. But in our way of thinking, that should be temporary. Again, your owners may be a little bit different. We want to make sure we're doing permanent types of solutions. CapEx planning, I'm going to keep going. That's really an important part of what we do because it really determines what the hold value is on our portfolio. But one thing on the right there, intimate knowledge of your building systems. I'm going to harp on that in a little bit, so I'll blow through that quickly. Optimized efficiency and performance. Those things that we just talked about, new chillers, new building automation systems, energy management systems, guest room energy management systems, they're all pretty useless if that switch is set to hand, right? And we see that a lot when we tour our buildings. We see guest room energy management systems that aren't reporting back to the head end. We spent good money. We want to make sure that you're leveraging those investments and ensuring that they're generating the desired returns that were committed during the initial ROI analysis. Another really important thing for us, we're not a flipper of assets. We're a pretty long-term hold, right? But when you go to sell a house, right, you get that house, you know, really spit shine. You know, it's looking really good, right? We want to make sure that in host assets, and I would hope some of the owners feel the same way, is you want to have show-ready properties, not just the front of the house, not just the public spaces, but also the back of the house and the heart of the house. So communications is important. It's really critical. And I know there are some GMs perhaps that have told you, you know, the owner doesn't like bad news. And that may be true, but I can tell you the owner doesn't like surprises either. So I was talking to John Sipe this morning. I got a call, actually an email late last night, Hey, my chiller's been down for 2 months. What do you want me to do? Time out. Why has your chiller been down for 2 months, and why don't I know about it? That's a problem. So what I would say is you want to limit the surprises. You want to stay on our radar screen. You know, think and prioritize what's important. If you were the owner, what would you want to know, right? So if my operations are compromised, like, I don't know, my chiller doesn't work. Emergency capital funding. Hey, there are times that stuff breaks. We get it, right? Let us know as you're doing it, and as far in advance as possible. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it's after the fact. Capital budget questions, risks, concerns, that sort of thing. We want to be engaged. Disaster management and recovery, critical. I've got another slide on that coming up in a couple minutes. So, we just finished spring training, and all the major league teams go to Arizona or Florida, right? And they really practice on fundamentals. I really believe, I bet you some of the old timers in the room would agree, is that we have gotten away to a certain extent from knowing our building, the foundation, the systems of our building. And I think that is really essential, that if you don't understand the intent, the design, the way your building systems operate, that's problematic. HVAC is an example. We continually have pressurization problems. Is your building under a negative pressure? If it is, that's a problem. Makeup air systems to your corridors, are they operational? I've actually seen a makeup air system roofed over. That's a problem. Makeup air unit to your kitchens. They're HV units typically. Kitchen staff doesn't like them. They have to be operational in order for your building pressurization to work. Fire and life safety. How many of you tested or understand the design intent of your smoke control systems? When was the last time you saw your stairwell pressurizations work? Have you had BAS upgrades? Have you replaced the fire alarm? Chances are you probably have issues. Domestic sanitary storm risers, I could go on and on. Do you have a SOVent system? Do you know what a SOVent system is? If you don't, you're probably fortunate. If you do, you probably better understand it and know how to maintain it. Electrical, and emergency distribution. When was the last time you PM'd your high voltage switch? When was the last time you load banked your generator? Have you followed through on all the thermography recommendations that was done last year? Building envelope. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. My message, though, is don't have a condo mindset. I see a lot of DOEs. I ask them what type of, what type of roofing system they have. I don't know. What type of facade? I don't know. So know what you have, understand the proper inspection, understand proper maintenance, only work through authorized contractors. In many cases, we're spending a lot of money on proprietary type systems. You need to make sure that that is being maintained, and you do have leaks by authorized warranty or authorized service folks. Warranty management, I can't tell you the number of times we put these 10, 15, 20-year warranties on a roof, and through turnover, transition, those warranties kind of get lost in the sauce. Very important to make sure that we're honoring the warranty and that we're actually getting what we paid for initially. So this is a really important one, renovation survival guide, and this presupposes that the renovation, guest rooms, ballrooms, meeting rooms, restaurant lobby, whatever, are being managed by a third party. Your institutional and historical knowledge of the building is absolutely essential. Don't underestimate that. We need to understand what's been going on in this building for the last 30-something years. If I could highlight a couple things, the next one would be important. Plans, specs, as-builts, your O&M manuals, treat them like gold. We walk into your building, and if they're thrown in a corner in your boiler plant, that's a problem. If they've been wet, keep them neat, keep them organized, know where they are, and keep them current to the greatest extent you possibly can. Again, that's gold. As they're developing the scope for your renovation, that's the time to speak up. Okay? You don't want to be talking up at the kickoff meeting, but because by then the design is baked, it's done, it's too late. This is your chance. This is your opportunity to make your feeling and make your opinion known. And if you're new to the property, Get with that engineer that's been on staff for 20 years. Find out what's really going on. If you got mold behind those walls, what's the condition of the dimming system? What's the condition of the HVAC? How about the piping insulation? What are we going to find when we rip into the ceiling? What are we going to find when we rip the walls off? Okay? All this is important. Nobody likes surprises. Be aligned with your project manager and the design team. Be realistic, right? The renovation is not going to take a 30-year-old building and make it brand new. There's just no way that's going to happen, right? So it's going to, just understand and don't be disappointed when it doesn't address every little detail that you're hoping that it would. Bottom line is don't take decisions personally. We want you to feel ownership in the asset, but at the end of the day, that decision is being made by the brand, it's being made by ownership, it's being made by others. So make your opinions known up front and early, but don't take it personally. And then cooperate. Don't be an obstacle. Be seen as a proponent of the project. And the one thing I can guarantee you is eventually those guys are going to leave you alone, right? They're going to walk out the door and you're going to have a newly renovated space. So just a couple things. Sometimes you're the project manager. Okay, there's a bunch of things that we like to think are important. Obviously, you want to adhere to specification standards. You know, make sure you're using pre-qualified professionals to do the work. Thoughtful scope, design, and specifications, and do an RFP. You know, don't give me a price. Tell them what you want and make sure that when you get the pricing back, it's apples to apples to apples rather than apples to bananas to elephants. Really important. And then continue to keep ownership apprised if they're interested in understanding what your timelines are and critical milestones. Okay, so I do have a couple IT slides because I understand that there's a couple IT folks in the crowd. Host is a member, as many owners are, of the Owner and Franchise Technology Advisory Council. From an infrastructure standpoint, we're at a difficult time, right? We're spending a lot of money on infrastructure. What we're ultimately trying to do is future-proof our buildings with system-agnostic cabling designs. You know, I'd like to tell you for 20 years after we renovate, we shouldn't have to touch again. But, you know, I think I'm a little bit more realistic, and that's really not going to happen. But that's what we're really thinking about. We want to make one investment, and we want that to last as long as we possibly can. So the other types of systems, you know, right now, in-room entertainment. This is like the blurring between IT and engineering, right? You know, you've got your TVs, and you guys are, you know, launching a new platform. You've got Wi-Fi that's in more demand now than it's ever been, with more devices and more access points, minibars, telecom. The list goes on and on. But at the end of the day, we're really looking to understand clear, effective CapEx and OpEx models. That's really, really important to us, and I would believe most owners. We do support your brand standards. We may push back on certain items, and I would imagine other owners feel the same way. But we are very much in support. Always think, again, we talked value enhancement, ROI opportunity. Does one exist? Also ask yourself, will this technology lead to new and repeat business? Because that translates to value as well, right? Present the business case. That's really important, often where things get missed. So it's important when you're looking at technology to present the business case. We prefer to pilot or do proof of concept prior to mass rollout, even if you've done rollouts within your organization. We want to see how it works within our assets. And at the end of the day, I think I share the sentiment of many other owners. We really don't necessarily want to be on the bleeding edge of technology. We've been there before. It's not a pretty place. Capital planning. Wow, this is part art, part science, but in my way of thinking, it's a 365-day-a-year process. If you wait until 2 weeks before your budgets are due, it's too late. Just-in-time replacement focus. I know, you know, capital's tight, and this is our focus right now, is we want to make sure that we're getting the maximum life cycles from our assets. So be thinking in terms of just-in-time, and look at refurbishment versus replacement options, okay? Look at the chiller overhaul that's going to get us another 10 years. Look at the fan coil units in the guest rooms. Can we refurbish them and get ourselves, again, another 8 to 10 years? Those are important decisions that can also enhance value. Talk to us early and often about your infrastructure requirements. Whatever you can do to provide backup, support, documentation, expert opinions about the status and condition of your equipment is very helpful. Because at the end of the day, we've got a bucket of money and we're trying to figure out how to prioritize that across the entire portfolio on a need basis. The other thing is you've got a 10-year plan. It's a very difficult thing, and the crystal ball is important, but try to figure out, we're focused on that years 1, 2, and 3 very intently, but 4 through 10 are equally important, especially to owners like us, where we're looking to understand what the hold value of our assets are. Not going to spend a lot of time on environmental and moisture management, but another very important thing that can cost us a lot of money, have a moisture management plan. I've asked our asset managers to ask our host-owned assets to produce a copy of that plan at least annually. A Legionella prevention program that's consistent with ASHRAE standard 188P, obviously in the news and coming and important as well. Before you do any sort of indoor air quality testing, okay, please make sure that you're contacting your owner and make sure that it is okay, because there are good ways and bad ways to test air, and not all fly-by-nighters are testing air properly. Isolated versus systemic, I don't get too concerned about mold issues if it's very much isolated, but if it's systemic and all of a sudden you got the pink and the green and the gray stuff through the vinyl wall covering on an entire exposure or floors, that's a problem. So we want to communicate that. Emergency preparedness, I'm going to move pretty quickly through this stuff. I don't think there's anything new. You need a property-specific plan. The ultimate goal for us is asset preservation, right? And to minimize business interruption. So as you approach an event that can be forecast versus one that can't, focus should be on preserving the asset, number one, and returning to normal business operations. Owner meetings, quantify your value. That's really important, right? Talk about what you've been able to save on the P&L. Talk about your ROI projects. Talk about what you're doing in terms of sustainability. How are you marketing sustainability? What kind of awards and recognitions have you received for your efforts? Do a property tour. Get your asset manager out of the boardroom and into the boiler room. Really important from my perspective when you're touring. Don't go willy-nilly. Plan your route. Be a show-off. Don't be embarrassed. This is your opportunity to pat yourself on the back, show them what you've done. But at the same time, don't cover up. If you've got needs areas you really need to focus on, show them that area and then take them back in 6 months or 12 months and show them how you've made a difference in that hotel. There's a lot of value there. Integrate your 10-year plans into your walk. So be thinking that capital plan. Point out the chillers and the boilers and the pumps that you're going to be replacing, or the roofs or the facades or the windows. Identify ROI opportunities. So to summarize, as I've got the red light coming up here, open communications, I believe, at least from my perspective, is very important. Limit the surprises that you're communicating. Know your building. If you take nothing away, if you can't answer those kinds of questions I was throwing out before, go back to your buildings and figure it out. It is important. That's really what we think your primary role is. Take pride in the property. Take pride as if you owned it. That's essential. Eventually, the project team will leave. They're only temporary guests and kind of a nuisance, but they're going to give you something really cool when they're done. And avoid bleeding edge technology, at least in our hotels. Understand, quantify, and add value. Understand the concept of adding value. Remember that formula, NOI divided by the cap rate, NOI divided by asset management, or asset value. So, to close, again, we thank you. We know you leave a lot, in our buildings, and we know other owners, you do the same thing for your owners as well. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. You take a lot of pride. We do appreciate the job that you guys do each and every day. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Mr. Rick Werber. Thanks, Rick.
Sure, I'll take that.